Greetings, I'm Demonac, and it's Hearthstone
Let's
time.
see if I can make it through part 2 of my Gadgetzan setlist video from Shaman through Neutral. Neutral is going to be a lot. It'll probably be longer. But let's see. So, let's see. Shaman, again, it's in a faction that has Jade Golems, but let's start with... Okay, first, this is weird. Discover a card with Overload for 1 mana. But it's got an Overload of 1, which... Like, yes, if you have stuff that benefits from Overload, you can get benefit from this, like from your Trogs and your Storm Elementals and stuff, but man, I would like this card so much better if it did not have Overload. Because Overload's already annoying, and you're committing to more Overload, and you're like, I mean, discovering a card with Overload... Cards with Overload are cheaper to cast. So I guess there's a reason they have to make this cost more than, like, a lot of these other sort of one-cost Discover cards, like the one-cost Discover a Taunt, one-cost Discover a Death Rattle card. They need to make this cost more because Overload cards have lower front-loaded costs, so you could potentially get something stronger in an emergency than expected. There's quite a variety. You're guaranteed to get Shaman cards. Like, that's pretty strong, potentially. And there's a lot of, like, area damage spells. Just a high proportion of Overload cards are area damage spells. There's also a lot of minions, but... Anyway, this will often get you removal, but I don't like that it has that Overload. That doesn't mean it's not good, though. Devolve. Which seems pretty good to me. Like, it costs more than Evolve. It costs 2. Oh, darn. You take all enemy minions and nerf them into ones that cost 1 less. Potentially they can get good stuff out of that, and if any of their minions were damaged, they will now be healed. But on the other hand, if any of their minions were buffed, this gets rid of it. If they have death rattles, this gets rid of it. I don't know if this is something you want to play all the time. It seems pretty obnoxious. It seems like a good thing to have, but maybe it doesn't always work out that well. I don't know. Obviously, it's random, so... I don't like that aspect of it. But just like Evolve is strong, Devolve seems potentially pretty strong. And the Jade Claws, they're exactly like the Overload Axe, except you get 1 less use, and instead, you get a Jade Golem. So you get 2 cost and Overload of 1 for a 2-attack weapon. Yeah, 2 uses instead of 3, but you also immediately get a Jade Golem, which has... I would have to say it makes it better. It's just better, because that's a 1-1 at least, but if you've summoned even 1 Jade Golem in the game, or just if this is your first one, it makes your next one bigger, you're going to get pretty good value very rapidly out of this. For 4 mana, you can just summon 4 1-1 Murlocs. That gives you a lot of Murlocs. Is it the greatest? I don't know. But Jade Lightning, so it's 4 mana for 4 damage. A little bit steep, I guess, but I mean, it's solid. It's 4 damage to players or minions, and it summons a Jade Golem. And again, this can be more expensive if you're already playing with this, because again, every card that you add that does Jade Golems makes your other Jade Golem cards stronger. We have the Jinyu Water Speaker. He's a 3/6 for 4 with Overload of 1. Battlecry restores 6 health. And like... that I don't know. He does help you if you want to be control-y, but I don't know if that's really... When I want to pay Overload for a minion, I probably want to get a minion that's going to help me, like, beat down my opponent faster or something. This is a good size, sort of, but it does seem inferior to what's-his-face. The elemental one is, like, 3/6 for 4, Overload 1, and has plus 1d4 attack on his Battlecry. Restore 6 health is more passive, although if this guy dies right away, you did still get something. Lotus Illusionist is a 3/5 for 4, but after it attacks a hero, so it's going to hit the actual hero, you transform it into a random 6-cost minion. That is some weird. But it's got decent enough stats, it has a reasonable chance to survive, or it will take some effort to remove it. If it hits the other hero, it's going to actually do 3 damage, which is something. and then it turns into a random 6-cost minion, which even if it was damaged or something, that's pretty interesting. And of course, if you do have evolving, like once a minion hits 6 cost, evolving it makes it super awesome, because 7-cost minions tend to be great. White Eyes, who I actually got, legendary, he's not the most exciting legendary ever, but he's also perfectly playable, I think. You get a 5/5 taunt for 5, you compare that to other sort of mid-range cost taunt minions, and it's fine. You can get a 3/5 or a 3/5 taunt for 4. You can get a 3/6 taunt for 5. Hard to get much more than that with a taunt. You can get 3/6 taunt with an ability for 5. This is a 5/5 taunt for 5. And his Death Rattle shuffles the Storm Guardian into your deck. The Storm Guardian is a 10/10 taunt, who also costs 5. So, I mean, that's pretty long term. A 10/10 taunt for 5 isn't necessarily a completely game-winning thing, but it's also pretty damn good if you get it and play it. I don't know. I don't know if he serves any specific purpose of awesomeness, but it does seem reasonably good. And the Jade Chieftain, who is a 5/5 for 7, but when he comes into play, he summons a Jade Golem and gives it taunt, so it can protect him. It's kind of assumed that by the time you hit 7 mana stuff, a Jade Golem is going to be pretty good. You should be getting a 3/3 or a 4/4, you would hope, at which point you're getting pretty good value out of him. So I think he's perfectly serviceable in the Jade Golem thing. We have, for Warlock, Blood Fury Potion. 3 mana, give a minion +3 attack, or give a demon +3 attack and +3 health. That's pretty decent. That's less crappy than a lot of their previous demon buffs. I mean, +3 attack, it's a little bit expensive mana-wise for just, like, the blessing of +3 attack if you're using that if you're just using that to trade a small minion for a big one. But on demons, that starts to be pretty significant. Like, you can kill something and have it survive and have it still be a pretty big threat. It's also another potion that can be generated by random potion things. Unlicensed Apothecary. 5/5 for 3. Demon. Whenever you summon a minion, he deals 5 damage to your hero. So that's... See, this is where you get confused. I'm pretty sure summon a minion is any way that you get a demon. Whereas if it says play a demon... Sorry, if play a minion would be playing a minion from your hand. Like you had a card in your hand that was a minion card, and you played it. Summon a minion, I think, would trigger from anything that gives you a minion. So if your 1/1 townsperson dies and his Death Rattle summons a 1/1 replacement minion, that would deal 5 damage to your hero under the Unlicensed Apothecary. He's in, like, there are a lot of demons that have stupid drawbacks that just make them kind of bad. This is one that you could potentially build your deck to play around somewhat. I mean, you're not going to play with no other minions. That would be ridiculous in Hearthstone. It's not like Magic the Gathering. You don't make, like, minionless decks. Or, if there are any, they're pretty uncommon. But, certainly, he comes out, he's very fat for very cheap, and you could get some pretty good value out of him. Then eventually he dies if you have other stuff to do other than summoning minions in that time. Because he's a 5/5 for 3, and if he dies right away, or just if you get a couple turns out of him and don't summon a minion in that time, then he's not having any significant drawback. The drawback is that it's discouraging you from playing him. But he seems pretty, like, that's going to see play. I don't know best strategy for him, but no, that one's interesting. I have to think about that. Blast Crystal Potion. Another potion. 4 mana, destroy a minion, and lose a mana crystal. This seems very Warlocky. I mean, generally you would rather pay 1 more to assassinate a minion and not lose one of your mana crystals. Of course, late in the game, once you have 10 mana, this makes no difference, basically. It's going to destroy an empty mana crystal, I'm confident. So, yeah. But destroying a minion for 4 mana is pretty good. It could definitely set you back early on. Like, that's unpleasant to spend 4 and then not gain a mana the next turn, effectively. But it's strong enough. It is definitely useful. I don't know how popular it will be. Crystal Weaver. He's a 5/4 for 4 who gives your demons +1/+1. Now, he doesn't say anything about it in hand, so this is like a normal card. This is like give your demons in play +1/+1. But it is a battle cry, so he's permanently giving those guys +1/+1 if you have any demons in play. And I mean, a 5/4 for 4 with that ability, he's excellent. He's just excellent. You have 4/2 Murloc for 4. And his battle cry lets you pay health instead of mana for the next Murloc you play this turn. So, if you have a big Murloc, like you could play this guy as a 4/2, and then you could spend 4 health to play the legendary charge Murloc, whose name I've forgotten now, the old One Eye or something. I don't know, whatever. But you could play him immediately for free, and that gives you that's a lot of stuff on the board for 4 mana. So. That's interesting. I mean, his stats and cost. He looks like he works out weird. Unless there's a really big Murloc, I'm not sure that this is the optimal thing. I mean, normally, if you have another Murloc in your hand, normally you're going to be playing a 2 or 3 cost Murloc. I guess he lets you like play him and the Warlord for 4 mana and 3 health. That's pretty good. I don't know about him. I'm not as much of a Murloc guy though. 6 mana, deal 5 damage to all characters. Spellfire Potion. That is very strong. That is remarkably similar to the Priest one that deals 5 damage to all non-dragon minions. They're both very strong. I'm less fond of the Warlock version as damaging characters. I mean, you can use this to finish your opponent, but you have to have more health than they do, which is tricky. Cabal Trafficker is a 6/6 for 6. At the end of your turn, add a random demon to your hand. Well, that's some card advantage right there. No one's complaining about that. Now, random demon can result in some really random disadvantages. Some of them are terrible and you would never want to play them. But still, it's a 6/6 for 6. You're getting a free card that turn, like at the end of that turn. And then if she survives, she's going to give you more free cards. So she's definitely strong. This guy, I've seen in the arena already, he's excellent. Okay, so there's, in the basic set, you have the 6/6 demon for 6, who deals 1 damage to all other characters. It's kind of, This guy costs 1 more mana. He's the same size, but he's not doing 1 damage, he's doing full-on Hellfire. 3 damage to all their minions. That is significant board clear when it comes along with a good-sized minion. Do 3 damage. I mean, you're hurting players too, which, for better or for worse, my preference is not to hurt players with this kind of thing, but comes with the territory. But yeah, 6/6 that deals 3 damage to all other minions is very powerful. Because, yeah, it's just doing so much in 1 card. It's giving you a good-sized minion and potentially blowing up a lot of things for good card advantage, so these guys are very strong and common, so that's going to be a staple of Warlock decks, I am pretty sure. Cruel the Unshackled. Again, another no-duplicate guy, he's from that faction. If your deck has no duplicates, summon all demons from your hand. So, okay, he's a 7/9 for 9. He's like a big, expensive demon. He has no drawback. Just, I guess, saying something for a Warlock, although he's a legendary, you expect a lot. If you have demons in your hand, he will drop them all into play. And of course, a lot of demons, a lot of their drawbacks are battle cries. If he's just summoning them all from your hand, I don't think that's not going to trigger their battle cries, I'm pretty sure. So he's just going to drop them into play, which would be beneficial. And of course, he does work along with the Trafficker, fill your hand with demons and then wham! But he does seem inferior to previous Warlock legendaries, like making yourself invulnerable and giving all demons +2/+2. So, I don't know. Warrior cards. Hey, I know a god. So, 1 mana, discover a minion with taunt. I don't know, seems pretty good to me. These discover cards tend to be good, because it helps to even out your mana curve, right? You can play this first turn, you probably take a cheaper guy. You can play this, if you draw this later in the game, you just get the biggest, fattest taunt guy you can find. So the card kind of does double duty. And at 1 mana, it's not really slowing you down that much. It's not costing you a card, because it's just giving you another card with card choice. So that's very good. This guy, again, I mentioned him in the previous video. If this was like a neutral guy, I would just craft him out of dust immediately. He's awesome. I love cheap legendaries that are good. 2/2 for 2, but when his battle cry gives all weapons in your hand and deck +1 attack. So he doesn't add use to them, okay, but still +1 attack to all the weapons in your hand and deck. That's pretty sweet. It doesn't affect the weapon you have in play, and it doesn't affect weapons that are created by, like a battle cry on a minion that gives you a weapon. There are a couple of guys that do that. It's not going to affect that. So maybe he's not the ultimate power. For some reason I thought he was also giving it durability, which would be like insanity. But he's still, for your turn 2 play, that's a pretty good play. And make weapons good. Make weapons great again. Public Defender is funny. So you have a 0/7 taunt for 2. Like, he is stepping it up. 0/4 taunt for one guy is kind of sad. Like, it just doesn't do enough. A 0/7 taunt for 2 mana, that is a fair size. Like, he's preventing a fair amount of damage, and then, if you can boost his attack in any way, then suddenly he's going to, actually do something back, like inflict some punishment on the guys. At that point, if he has even 1 or 2 attack, that's going to make it hard for small minions to get through him, like very expensive to get through him with small minions. So he has some potential. He basically needs to be buffed with something. Something like, I don't know, Stolen Goods. 2 mana, give a random taunt minion in your hand, +3/+3. So that's, it's a little bit more expensive than the Hunter one, and taunt minion is kind of specific, but on the other hand, that sort of controls who gets it, and like, +3/+3 is pretty big. This is a lot easier to make use of than Rampage. It just is. Now, Rampage you can play on a minion and then attack right away, whereas this, it's a minion in your hand, so that minion's going to come into play and they have a chance to kill him first. But you've Stolen Goods and then play a Public Defender. So if you're going second, coin Stolen Goods, turn 2, play a 3/10 taunt. F, man. F. In the arena, if you could do that, that would be like ridiculous. But anyway, he's pretty solid. Here we have the Grimfleet Pawnbroker, 3/3 for 3. Battlecry, give a random weapon in your hand, +1/+1. That is +1 attack and use. That's pretty good. I mean, because she's more expensive, she's not necessarily helping as much with the Fiery War Axe. But I don't know. I don't know if this is like a real power card, but it does seem viable to me. So if the Brass Knuckles, 4 mana for a 2 attack weapon seems a bit much. It does have 3 uses. Every time your hero attacks, you give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. So that's with no requirements. You just have to have a minion in your hand. That can add up pretty well. Like, you compare this to the Paladin sword, the 1 attack weapon for 3 with 5 charges, and then every time you play a minion, it eats one of the charges to get +1/+1. This, you're getting the full value from the weapon, which is overcosted as a weapon. But you're also getting all those +1/+1s, which does add up. So that feels like that can add a lot of value. Certainly in the arena, this would be excellent. Grimy Gadgeteer. This guy is pretty strong. So 4/3 for 4. So that's not very good stats, but it's not terrible. He's pretty fragile. But he is going to get his ability once because it triggers at the end of turn. At the end of turn, he just gives a random minion in your hand +2/+2. So he only costs 4 to get out, and he's giving out +2/+2s. See, there was a Paladin guy who I was playing. I was like, I don't know about this. He costs 5, and yes, he gives a bonus to all minions in your hand, but it's only +1/+1, and by that point in the game, how many minions do you have in your hand? So this guy comes out cheaper, and you only need 1 minion in your hand for his ability to trigger, and that's a pretty good ability. Like, +2/+2 is a much chunkier bonus than the +1/+1. That adds up very fast. Like, 1 +2/+2 is already a significant difference in a minion, whereas a +1/+1 may or may not be. And yeah, and you only need 1 minion in your hand to make this worthwhile, whereas the guy who's giving them to all the minions in your hand, well, how many minions are you not playing? You know what I mean? I did skip over Sleep with the Fishes. Whoops. 2 mana, deal 3 damage to all damaged minions. Oh, that is a very interesting card. It's selective, so I mean, if your minions are not damaged, it won't hurt them. This is, you can kind of use it to execute smaller minions, but no, that one's really interesting. You can see playing with it. It could definitely be a pain sometimes. Because you're thinking, like, okay, I want to, like, use that with whirlwinds and stuff, right? Deal 1 damage to everything, and then Sleep with the Fishes. That's a 2-card combo, but it is doing a lot of damage. If you had 1 spell damage from somewhere, it'd be a horrendous amount of damage. For the 2 cards, because they would each be getting it, right? Whirlwind would get the spell damage, and then this would get the spell damage, and then suddenly you're doing 6. Which should kill everything the majority of the time. But if you're doing damage to all minions, then this is also going to hit yours. Whereas you could try and just use some of the warrior like 1 damage cards to soften up enemy minions, like you use the blood one or whatever, like 1 mana, deal 1 damage to something, and if it doesn't die, you get a 2/2. So you do that, and then you Sleep with the Fishes. It does another 3 damage to that guy. But the problem is, it's hard to control this because there could be other stuff. You could have other damaged minions. Your opponent could have other damaged minions unrelated to the transaction you just did. I don't know. It's very interesting, though. I think that was a smart card for them to print. That's going to make for some interesting decisions down the road. And lastly, we have the Alley Armorsmith, who is a 2/7 taunt for 5. Whenever this minion deals damage, you gain that much armor. So, I guess she's really counting on getting some stolen goods. Because the 5/10 taunt, and whenever it deals damage, you gain that much armor. That's a lot. I guess with taunt, that ability really can generate a lot of armor. Even without a buff, you play her, your opponent's probably going to have to hit her with at least 2 minions. So you're going to get at least 4 armor, and that's kind of worst case. If you have any kind of buff on her, so that she's actually killing the minions that hits her, and gaining you more armor. And also, if she gets to attack, she's going to deal damage to your opponent and gain you the armor again. So, yeah, it's interesting. Not my favorite. Neutral cards, of which there are many, of course. A lot of interesting. So we've got right off 2/2 for 1. Death Rattle, restore 4 health to both players. So this is a pretty good turn 1 play if you're doing a control-y sort of deck. Because, of course, later in the game you can still play it, and in the mid-game, your control deck probably still wants this effect to go off, more than not. On the other hand, it's a 2/2 for 1. There's a huge difference between a 2/3 for 1 and a 2/2. The 2/2 loses to 2/3 minions, right? And it also dies to most 1-cost minions, because most of the 1-cost minions that people actually play are going to be 2/1s. So it's not really winning that hard. This will beat up 1/1s. Yay. But yeah, there's a good chance this doesn't actually win that hard against first turn minions. So, yeah. Because the 2/3, like the zombie chow, very few minions that cost 1 mana can actually trade with it. Generally, it just eats them and is still alive. This can kill almost anything that costs 1 mana. There are more 1/3s now, but they're uncommon. So this will kill most of your enemy 1-drops, but it will also die usually. It can also kill 2-drops, but so can all the 2/1s. It has the advantage it doesn't get shot for 1 by the classes that can do that, but yeah. Still, it does, the restore 4 health to both players could be useful for control decks. Peach is pretty cool legendary if you're playing pirates. I don't know if I want to craft him or not, but he is just adding some extra oomph to your deck if you play pirates, because it's a 1/1 pirate for 1 with charge, but when you play any pirate, like the first time in the game that you play any pirate, this guy just jumps out of your deck and onto the board with charge. So turn 1, you play your 1/1 pirate that steals you a free card as a rogue, and then boing, you get Patches the Pirate as a bonus, hit your opponent for 1. It's not like a tremendous gain, but it's a gain that costs you nothing. He just thins your deck and gives you an extra 2 points of stats with charge on the board. So if you're going to play pirates, he is almost certainly just going to make your deck a little bit better. He's kind of cool that way. Small Time Buccaneer, a 1/2 pirate for 1, but he has +2 attack while you have a weapon equipped. Wow, is that a good card for Rogue? Goddamn. Because it's pretty easy for Rogue to meet that criteria. And a 3/2 for 1, that is some good value. Weasel Tunneler, the 1/1 beast for 1, Death Rattle, shuffle this minion into your opponent's deck. Okay, that is weird. So, I guess the idea is your deck benefits from beasts. There's a reasonable chance that your opponent's deck doesn't care about beasts. So you have a tiny advantage with him there. Plus, if you can get this guy early in the game, then hooray, you play him and he did his job. He was a 1/1 for 1, which is not that impressive. But the idea is, once he dies, he goes into your opponent's deck, and hopefully they're going to draw him instead of a good card later in the game. And you could potentially use this with the small-time recruits, right? So you have 2 Weasel Tunnelers in your deck. You have 2 of those things, so you have a pretty darn good chance to get those Weasel Tunnelers early and get whatever crap value you can get out of a Weasel Tunneler, and then infest your opponent's deck so that they're going to draw Weasel Tunnelers, hopefully at some critical time when they needed to draw, Dragon Fire Potion or whatever. That is a very weird card. Okay. You do that, Blizzard. Blowgill Sniper, super good. Okay. This guy finally hit the sweet spot where I consider him viable. There's so many similar cards, and I'm dissing them all the time. I'm like, that Knight Elf, whatever, 1/1 for 1, who deals 1 damage and has no keywords, you suck. That is just not doing enough for a card, even though, for some reason, I think slightly better of the Hunter card, which is a spell that deals 1 damage, and then gives you a 1/1 beast, which is very similar, except that beasts have a keyword, and technically as a spell, it could be improved by spell damage. I don't know why it just okay, the beasts are useful enough for hunters that I see that as being kind of useful, whereas the elf with no keywords or anything doesn't seem good. I also hate the shitty Dwarf Rifleman, who is a 2/2 for 3 with Battlecry deal 1 damage. He also has no keywords. He sucks. He just costs too much. The Blowgill Sniper is finally in the sweet spot. So a 2/1 for 2, that is still a pretty weak minion. You pay 2 mana for this thing, it can just be shot by a mage or whatever. But if it doesn't get shot by Fire Blast, and even then it's costing your opponent mana. It wasn't completely free for them early in the game. You pay 2 mana, deal 1 damage, so that 1 damage is still useful. You can use it to finish off things, soften up things. It can work out. Plus, 2/1 instead of a 1/1 is just enough that he can potentially trade with other things that came in around that point. In fact, If your opponent plays a 2/3, you answer with the Blowgill Sniper, who deals 1 damage to it, and now they can probably trade. This will just often work out okay, whereas if he was the Dwarf, he would take another whole mana to play for 1 extra hit point. That extra hit point does nothing against other minions. The chances that your 2/2 will survive better than a 2/1 against any minion your opponent is likely to play are very slim. Whereas his 2 attack means that he can kill enemy 3/2s and stuff like that. So there's all that. So mathematically, he just works out to be way more useful than those other 2 cards that I hate that are very similar. Plus, he's a Murloc. So actually, if you have Murloc stuff, now he's potentially very good. Because Murloc stuff does have that little snowball equality. I mean, he can benefit from the Warlord. He can trigger bonuses on other guys. So he's very good, I think. Dirty Rat is a 2/6 taunt for 2. So what's his drawback? His battle cry summons a random minion from your opponent's hand, like for your opponent. That's a pretty steep price. It's possible that later in the game, this would have no drawback. Later in the game, your opponent has like 2 cards left in your hand. They might both be spells, you know. So maybe you can get away with this 2/6 taunt for very little mana, and it'll be okay. But summoning a random minion from your opponent's hand is a terrible drawback that could well land you like, I play a 2/6 taunt. Oh, I got an 8/8 dragon. Bite me. So I can't imagine he's going to see a lot of play. I don't know. I mean, warrior. If you're a warrior, you can like stolen goods him. Then he could be a turn 2 or turn 3, depending on whether you had the coin or not. Like 5/9 taunt. That is a pretty big minion. At that point, he probably wins out against whatever card you gave your opponent for free. And you aren't giving them an extra card. You're saving them the mana. So if he pulls an enemy minion who is not overly large, he can work out as a profit because he is himself able to take care of it. And he is depriving your opponent of battle cry, I guess. If your opponent was saving a minion for the battle cry, he's going to hose that. But man, that is a risk. I think he's designed to be a counter to certain strategies. I don't know if he's ever going to be viable to be used that way. Anyway, Friendly Bartender, he's a much more straightforward. He's a 2/3 for 2, and every turn, he gives you 1 health at the end of turn. So if you're playing a control-y deck, I could see using that. I don't know how popular he'll be in actual constructed decks, but he seems perfectly fine. He's going to do 2/3. He'll guaranteed heal you 1 if it's later in the game and you've taken any damage. He fights okay against other 2-cost things, and if for some reason he stayed alive, he could heal you 3 or 4 hit points. Who knows? Not that exciting, but solid. Gadgetzan Socialite, a 2/2 for 2, who restores 2 health. That starts getting interesting with priest stuff, right? Because, I mean, there's so many ways you benefit from healing. This obviously can heal minions, unlike Buddy here. 2/2 for 2 is bad stats, but that healing could be very valuable, and it's another way with Akanai Soul Priest and stuff like that, where you could turn the healing into damage and get extra benefits, or you could just be using other things that benefit from healing, of which there are many. Okay, here's where we start getting into those factions I mentioned before, because there are these icons that show you what faction it is, and basically it's a neutral minion, but it's not fully neutral. It can't go in any deck, so you can't play this guy in a priest deck. You can play him in a hunter, paladin, or warrior deck, because he's in the beatdown faction, whatever. I don't remember the faction names, don't much care. He's in the faction that can go in hunter, paladin, or warrior decks. So this guy's a 1/1 for 2 who discovers any hunter, paladin, or warrior card. What you're comparing him to is that beetle, right? It's a 1/1 beast for 2, so it's got a keyword. And it discovers you a random 3-cost card, which does narrow down what you're going to get, this is not very narrow at all. But on the other hand, that random 3-cost card, later in the game, you're still only getting a 3-cost card. This is a full-on Discover where, if you play him early in the game, you can potentially choose something that has a relatively low casting cost, something you can use in the next couple turns. Or, if you draw him later in the game, you can play him and just take the biggest, fattest card you can find, and you get a lot of value out of it that way. So he's potentially pretty interesting. Auction Master Beardo, another cheap legendary. He's a 3/4 for 3. Every time you cast a spell, he refreshes your hero power. That's kind of not super powerful. I mean, if you had him, I could see playing him, potentially, because, I don't know, it's just a 3/4 for 3 is fine. You're likely to cast spells sometimes. You will refresh your hero power. Sometimes you will get to use your hero power twice. But, I mean, you could try and use him as a combo with Priest Legendary here. He makes your hero power free. So, it's a 2 legendary combo. That's not a very good combo as far as combos go. But, with the other guy, you just have to play him once. He doesn't have to stay alive. And then as long as Beardo is alive, even at some later point in the game, now, every time you cast a spell, you would be able to use your hero power to heal for 2, or if you were in shadow form, you'd be able to, like, do 2 damage extra every time you cast a spell. If that combo ever went down, it could be pretty rough. But, yeah, I don't know. Still, he does let you trigger Inspire stuff potentially more often. So he would, if you had a lot of Inspire stuff in your deck for some reason, you could potentially go with that. He might enhance it. Backstreet Leper, yeah. He's a 3/1 for 3, deals 2 damage to the enemy hero. I wasn't a big fan of the Leper Gnome before they nerfed it. Blizzard nerfed it. It obviously was strong enough that I probably should have been playing it, but I wasn't that fond of it. This guy is inferior to the old 2/1 for 1, deal 2 damage Leper. Of course, that old Leper has been nerfed to a 1/1 for 1, which I definitely don't play now. This guy, I don't see playing him either particularly. He's just, those are not enough stats for 3 mana, and yes, he deals 2 damage pretty much automatically to your opponent. Whatever. Blubber Baron. He's a 1/1 for 3. Whenever you summon a Battlecry minion, while this is... Whoa, hold on. That's friggin' interesting. So this guy... Yeah, he's a 1/1 for 3, whatever. You're never going to play him unless you had a bunch of, like, buff stuff go off while... He just sits in your hand all game, waiting around, absorbing buffs and stuff as they come. You're not going to play him, but while he's in your hand, he's giving +1/+1 to all your Battlecry minions. That's amazing. That is so cool. That is so cool. Yeah. Anyway, Fellwork Soul Fiend, a 3/7 for 3. At the start of your turn, deal 2 damage to himself. So he is an interesting form, like an adjustment of the Injured Blade Master, right? Injured Blade Master is normally a 4/3 for 3 that has room to be healed up to 4/7. This guy's a 3/7 right off the bat, but he hurts himself every turn, which, as a priest, you can counteract easily if you need to, and potentially you can benefit from a lot by because he lets you trigger your healing stuff. So he's going to see play in a lot of priest decks. Honestly, you could think of him as a 3/5 for 3. He's got very little drawback compared to just a straight 3/5 for 3 with no abilities. He really does. Because how long do minions normally last? Turn 3, you play this guy, he's a 3/7. If they want to kill him right away, I mean, they only need to do 5 damage to him for him to be gone at the start of your turn. But it still takes 5 damage. And he's probably going to live that long. And then, yeah, I guess he's going to be less good than a naked 3/5 for 3. But a lot of the time it's going to work out similar. He's pretty decent. Grime Street Smuggler gives a random, like, it's just 2/4 for 3. Give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. That's pretty good. That's 3/5 worth of stats for 3 mana, even though those stats aren't on him. He's in that Warrior, Paladin, Hunter faction. He's pretty solid. Of course, he works well with the Blubber Baron. He shows you why the Blubber Baron is so good, because you have him in your hand. This guy is going to come out as a 3/5 for 3, and then he's going to give kickbacks. He's going to like give the Baron +1/+1, or possibly something else in your hand, which would be better because you don't ever want to play the Baron. Or it's not that you never want to play the Baron, but his job is to sit in your hand, which is pretty damn strong. Hired Gun is just a 4/3 taunt for 3. I'd rather have a 3/4 for 3 with taunt, especially so, but that is a good amount of stats for 3 mana, and taunt is a useful ability. So he's a perfectly solid card. He seems like a good arena pick. He's not world-shakingly good. He's not going to be like in all the decks, but yeah, pretty good card. Cabal Courier is a 2/2 for 3, which is again like weak on the stat department. She's from the Mage Priest Warlock faction. Discover a Mage Priest Warlock card. All the stuff I said about the one guy applies to her. Just works out fine. And of course, these Discover guys work well with the Blubber Baron. I may just have to craft myself 2 Blubber Barons because that's amazing. Sergeant Sally, another cheap legend, and again, she's designed around this theory that you can give them powerful abilities, but give them crap stats, and the abilities are based on the stats, so you have to work a little to make them good. But I mean, she's a 1/1 for 3 with Death Rattle, deal damage equal to her attack to all enemy minions. Only enemy minions. So already at 1/1, she's actually not terrible. She's not good, but not terrible. A 1/1 for 3, when it dies, it deals 1 damage to your opponent's minions. But it's a Death Rattle, so she can either get buffs while she's in her hand with all this Gadgetstan stuff, or you could just buff her when she's in play. Give her like +3 attack from something, and then trade her. You give her +3 attack, say like, I forget the names of every card in existence now, but you Rockbiter weapon her to temporarily give her +3 attack, or you wish it wouldn't lose your page every time it went back. It's really dumb design. You Rockbiter weapon her, or you Blessing of Might her, or you use the new Paladin, like, expensive potion to give her +3 attack. You hit the biggest enemy minion for 4 damage, and then she explodes and deals another 4 damage to that minion, and also deals 4 damage to all the other minions. Like, that's really strong. I should probably craft her. Street Trickster? This is an interesting guy. A lot of the spell damagey guys just have stats too crappy to do the job. This guy definitely fills a niche. His niche is to be an inexpensive source of spell damage that has a good chance to stay on the board for multiple turns. He has 0 attacks, so the enemy can beat on him for free. But with 7 hit points for his 3 mana, he's gonna take a lot more to get rid of normally than your Geomancer that you paid 2 for, while still giving you +1 spell damage. He's actually a neutral demon, which is pretty interesting. I think he's the first neutral demon. So obviously good for lots of things. You can put him in a Warlock deck. He can survive a Hellfire despite his own +1 damage. Toxic Sewer Ooze, another 4/3 for 3. 4/3 for 3 is perfectly fine if it has a good ability. His ability is remove 1 durability from your opponent's weapon. I think they decided at some point that flat out destroying the enemy weapons, like the other Ooze, is maybe a little bit strong. They're not going to remove it or anything. They're never going to nerf that guy. I really doubt it. But I don't think they want to add a whole bunch more destroy weapon things. I think they'd rather add more of these. Where this guy is going to knock 1 durability off the weapon, which is still quite useful if they have weapons. Anyway, he's fine. Backroom Bouncer, 4/4 for 4. Whenever a friendly minion dies, gain +1 attack. There are a lot of good 5/4s for 4 mana that have some really good ability. I would choose one of them. I don't see playing this guy. You can make comparisons to the Ghoul, but the Ghoul gets benefits from killing enemy stuff. And yeah, I don't know. He's not like a terrible arena pick or something, but you would hope to get better for your rares. Daring Reporter is a 3/3 for 4. Whenever your opponent draws a card, gain +1/+1. So she's a 3/3 for 4 who's going to gain +1/+1 every turn at the beginning of your opponent's turn, because they draw a card every turn. But she's also there as a counter to strategies that draw too many damn cards. So I think she's probably going to see some play. I don't know if she works out to be good enough for like serious like tournament and ranked players to care. That is, it feels like, I don't know if it's actually a proper sort of counter to strategies that draw cards, but on the other hand, many decks draw cards because drawing cards is good. Almost any collectible card game, stuff that makes you draw cards is stuff that you should be attracted to because it tends to help you win. So she's pretty interesting. Genzo the Shark, 4 mana legendary. He's a 5/4 for 4. Whenever he attacks, both players draw up to 3 cards. I'm not a fan of giving stuff to my opponents, but it is interesting. If your opponent has fewer cards than you, you might just choose not to attack with him, although then he's not doing you much good. But if your deck empties its hand really fast, potentially this guy'd be pretty good. So maybe he's good with a deck that is full of 1/1s, like Murlocs or something like that. That just has tons of 1-drops, stuff to buff minions in your hand, and then you play him for mid-game to keep drawing back your cards after you've just played them all. Hosen Healer, he's a 2/6 for 4, Battle's Cry, full heal a minion. I foresee a future in which he is used in some kind of solo, like, adventure stuff. I don't think he's going to see a lot of play in normal Hearthstone games, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, because if your warrior is sitting around with your crazy, like, stolen goods 3/7 taunt that you played on turn 2 or whatever crazily buffed minions you have with taunt, then being able to full heal them is pretty good. I mean, I guess it works a little bit like like if you have a minion that is bigger than your enemy's minion, you can squash their minion, which would leave you so vulnerable that normally it would just get killed by anything, and then play this guy and heal it back up. So it could be okay. I don't see him being like commonly played or a powerhouse, but there's the Jade Spirit we talked about. All the Jade faction things. Probably, if you're playing a Jade Golem deck, I'm assuming you're going to put this in, because if you're going for Jade Golems, you probably want every single Jade Golem capable card that is available to your class. You just do, because when you summon that 6th Jade Golem, when you summon that 7th Jade Golem, when you summon that 8th Jade Golem, you're getting so much value for your Jadeness at that point that it doesn't matter that you're playing a crappy 2/3 for 4. And again, say you've played one other Jade Golem card before this. Turn 2, you played the rogue, like, do 2 damage, summon a Jade Golem when you combo it thing. You did 2 damage and you got a 1/1. Now on turn 4, you play this guy, you get a 2/3 and a 2/2, while you just got a Yeti worth of stats. Really poorly distributed Yeti. But you did get a Yeti worth, and of course, the next Jade Golem card you play is going to get a 3/3, at which point you're already doing pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see how they work out. Cabal is the name of the faction that is the mages, the potion people. The mages, warlocks, and priests. So yeah, 3/3 for 4 gives you a random potion. This is giving you a card in your hand. So it's a 3/3 and a card that you got for 4 mana. Potions have a wide variety of effects. They're almost always pretty good. none of them are too. They're all a little bit situational, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to net you good value almost all the time. Kazakis is like a neutral legendary for that faction. Again, he rewards you for not having duplicates. His create a custom spell power. I should have opened up a web page to look at it, because he does crazy. Okay, here's how Kazakis works with his potions. Apparently, I need to go further down that page. So first, you choose whether you want a 1-cost, 5-cost, or 10-cost potion. Then it'll randomly you'll get to discover twice more for what effects you want on your potion. You'll get 2 effects. There's a fair-sized list of different effects that you can get. So it's not too deterministic. But, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different effects. You're going to get 2 discoveries, so 2 choices of 3 effects for this. And of course, the size of the effects is scaled based on the potion cost. So the effects are the Fell Bloom here, which is either 2 damage, 4 damage, or 6 damage to all minions, based on your cost choice, obviously. The Gold Thorn, which gives all your minions +2, +4, or +6 health. The Heart of Fire, which deals 3 damage, 5 damage, or 8 damage to a target of your choice. The Ice Cap, which either freezes a random enemy minion, 2 or 3 random enemy minions. Ichor of Undeath summons a friendly minion that died this game, or does that twice, or does that 3 times, so potential triple resurrection, which is nuts. King's Blood, either draw you 1, 2, or 3 cards. Mystic Wool, which apparently doesn't you can't get this on a 1-mana potion, so a 1-mana potion, you're getting 2 sets of 3 choices from 9 possible options instead of the full 10. But at 5 mana, it will polymorph a random enemy minion. At 10 mana, it will polymorph all enemy minions. So you don't understand, this is like a 4-cost legend. He does require every card in your deck to be different when you play him. But you're getting 2 of these 10-cost effects if you choose a 10-cost potion. So the next turn you're going to do crazy stuff. Or, if you take the 5-cost option, turn 9 or 10, you could play him, create your potion, and then immediately play your potion to do one of these mid-range effects, which is also pretty damn powerful. The Nether Bloom can either summon you a 2/2, a 5/5, or an 8/8 demon, which mostly seems blatantly inferior to the Ichor of Undeath, but you don't always have all the choices, and maybe you haven't had a bunch of minions die, although I'm pretty sure you have. You can the Shadow Oil to either add a random demon, 1, 2, or 3 random demons to your hand, which could be like any demons, not just the crappy no ability demons generated by a spell. And Stone Scale Oil, which would gain you 4, 7, or 10 armor. So then your spell looks like this, basically, but with the effects described. So, yeah, Kazakis makes pretty strong potions. I mean, even at 1 mana, you're going to get an okay effect out of him. Like, it'll make it worth your 5 mana to have played Kazakis and then 1 mana for the potion. Like, 5 mana total. Will have been worth the effort. But obviously you want to be doing, like, the 5 or the 10 mana potions. Because the effects you get are really, really powerful. Anyway, that's Kazakis. But anyway, in the meantime, Kooky Chemist, he's pretty solid. He's a 4/4 with the Crazed Alchemist power. 4/4, swap the attack and health of a minion. That is just a really good, versatile ability. You're rarely going to go wrong with that. He's a little bit chunkier for his, you're getting more for your card. You're getting about the same for the casting cost as you do with the 2/2 for 2, but you're getting more for the card just because he's bigger, so it depends what you want him for. On the Facebook, they had a video of using Kazakis. I recommend you look up Kazakis custom potion video or something like that. Maybe I'll tack one on somewhere, because, yeah, I don't know all the permutations, but the potions he makes are pretty powerful stuff. Naga Corsair, this is really good. It's a 5/4 pirate for 4, so 5/4 and a keyword for 4. And it's just Battlecry, give your weapon +1 attack. If you're a rogue, this is like really easy to include in your deck. If you have any pirate synergies, it works well. Warriors also tend to have pirate synergies. Turns out warriors tend to have weapons. Nothing wrong with that card at all. It's very solid. The Hog Chopper, there are a whole bunch of these. Well, I don't know about a bunch. We'll see how many. I don't know how many. There are at least 2. I think there are probably more than 2. There are some of these chopper cards where they have pretty lame stats, like 4/4 for far. You want to get something good out of a card that is 4/4 for 4. It's got to have a good ability. This is a pretty good ability, right? But these Hog Choppers have Battle Cry that gives them charge if some condition is met. Usually it's not an easy condition to meet. In this case, this guy's going to have charge if your opponent's hand is empty. He's crap. How often is your opponent's hand empty in Hearthstone? Maybe late in the game it can happen, but most of the time you still have they're going to have 1 or 2 cards in your hand, and you have no way to control whether or not your opponent has cards in their hand. So, I would say this guy is garbage. Worgen Greaser, did you ever just want a 6/3 for 4? Here's a 6/3 for 4. He's very aggressive and fragile. Bomb Squad is a 2/2 for 5. You're like, what? Battlecry, deal 5 damage to an enemy minion. So, for 5 mana, for any class, you get a 2/2, and you get to deal 5 damage to a target minion of your choice. And then it has Death Rattle, deal 5 damage to your hero. So, that's a drawback. That you could easily decide that was a trade-off that was tolerable. You could also do a number of things to get rid of minions with Death Rattle. You could transmute. This would be a great one to, whatever that 3/2 rare guy who transmutes one of your minions into a minion of the same cost. This would be an amazing use of him. 5 mana, deal 5 damage to an enemy minion, then drop What's-His-Face for 2 mana, and turn this into a random 5-cost minion, which probably doesn't have Death Rattle 5 damage to your hero. That's pretty good. Or you could be playing with stuff to silence your own minions. Why not? Burgly Bully. This guy's kind of cool, especially if you're a rogue, right? He's a 4/6 for 5, which is okay. His stats are arranged properly anyway. I'd rather have a 4/6 than a 6/4. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, he just adds a coin to your hand. He just gives you more coins. So, if you get him out turn 5, you are probably going to get a couple of extra mana. There are going to be a couple of turns when you can play something you would otherwise not be able to play. Plus, if you're a rogue, he's helping to fuel your combos and stuff like that. And 4/6 for 5 is like perfectly competent stats. Doppelgangster. 5 mana, you get 3 2/2s, right? But it's not just that, because it's Battlecry summon 2 copies of this minion. So, again, if you've been following all the mechanics that buff minions in your hand, if this guy got just 1 hunter buff, or just got hit once by that 4/3 warrior guy that gives you a +2/+2 at the end of your turn, so he's a 4/4, you'd be paying 5 mana to summon 3 4/4s onto the board. And if you worked harder and got him buffed up, you could do crazy stuff. You could be whipping out, like, it would not be that hard to arrange that when you play this guy for 5 mana, you get 3 6/6 minions on the board. So, a lot of people are going to have decks using him, that's for sure. Finja the Flying Star. He's a 2/4 Murloc for 5. He has Stealth. Whenever he attacks and kills a minion, he summons 2 Murlocs out of your deck directly into play. Do not pass go, do not collect battle cries. I don't know about him. Yes, getting out more Murlocs is cool. He has Stealth, so he's going to survive, I guess, but 5 is a lot of mana for a 2/4 who does basically nothing unless he can attack and kill a minion. So, even if your opponent attacks him and trades, you don't get the benefit. He has to attack, which he will live long enough to attack once because of Stealth. 4 hit point Stealth minion is unlikely to die before attacking once. But I don't know. I think he costs too much. I don't think he's actually a card that the Murloc decks want. Maybe I'm wrong, because I'm not a Murloc player. Brookfu Master. He's a 3/5 Wind Fury for 5. If you want a slightly smaller, slightly cheaper Harpy, go nuts. It did eventually establish that the Harpy is decent, even though I don't like her that much. The dragon, or whatever, the like giant fairy dragon thing, the 5/5 Wind Fury for 7, is way overcosted, not good. The Harpy is much better than 5/5 for 7 guy. This guy, I don't know, he's easier to play than the Harpy. Does almost as much damage. His hit points are higher than his... I don't know. He's not that interesting. Lotus Agents, again for the Jade Stuff faction. So this guy is a 5/3 for 5 who discovers a card from 3 classes. That is... Like, discovering a card is strong. 5/3 for 5, I mean, I guess mages get a lot of value out of that 6/3 for 6 guy, or sorry, 6/3 for 5, who summons a, like, discovers a spell. This discovers any kind of card from 3 classes. So the mage guy is a class minion, so he has +1 point of stat compared to this guy. But discovering a card from 3 different classes, two of which are not the class you're currently playing, maybe that's valuable. Like, I don't know. I just have this feeling like he's kind of overcosted, but I'm sure in practice he's fine. Certainly, he's an easy pick in the arena. If this guy comes up in your row in the arena, you're probably going to want him, because that's good value. Red Mana Worm, 2/6 for 5. Whenever you cast a spell, he gains +2 attack. Okay then. I guess he likes working with the Burgly Bully, because those coins are spells. 2/6 for 5. You have to cast at least 1 spell to get his stats up to where they should be. Because obviously 2/6 is garbage. He's got to be a 4/6 for 5 to be kind of average. If you play him and then cast 2 spells, now he's big for the cost, but is he worth the effort? I don't know. Does not seem like a powerhouse. He is common. Second-rate Bruiser is a 4/5 taunt for 5, but if your opponent has 3 or more minions, then he's a 4/5 taunt for 3. Okay. I don't even know what to say about him. He seems functional. If you drop a 4/5 taunt for 3, like, he is a decent counter to a rush sort of deck that is rushing based on number of minions. So, I guess he's good for that. I don't know how popular or useful he's going to be. Running out of voice. Spiked Hog Rider. So he's another one of those, like, chopper guys, right? He's a 5/5 for 5. If an enemy minion has taunt, he gains... his battle cry gives him charge. This one is pretty decent, okay? 5/5 for 5 is okay. 5/5 charge for 5 is pretty good. He only has charge if your opponent has taunt, which means that he's less likely to be charging through and hitting your opponent for 5. But he can definitely, if you had stuff in play, he can come out there, kill the taunt so they can get through, or they can kill the taunt so he can get through, whatever works out to the most damage if you're just trying to finish your opponent. I don't know. He's like a 5/5 for 5 who is going to have charge a reasonable fraction of the time, and you don't have to do anything too tricky to arrange it. So he's okay. He's a perfectly viable arena pick, unlike the 4/4 who's garbage anyway. Streetwise Investigator is a 4/6 for 5 who removes stealth from enemy minions. That's just like a hoser. That doesn't seem tremendously valuable. Ancient of Blossoms, you got to make common cards, I guess. He's a 3/8 taunt for 6, which, is this better than a 3/6 taunt for 5? Because that 3/6 taunt for 5 doesn't seem that great to me, but this also doesn't seem that great, considering for 1 more mana you could get a 7/8 taunt that is also common. So, he's not very good. Aya Blackpaw, if you're doing a Jade deck, congratulations, Blizzard has convinced you to spend 1,600 dust. Because Yeah, because, I mean, she's a 5/3 for 6, which is kind of low in the stat department. But Battlecry, she summons a Jade Golem. Death Rattle, she summons a Jade Golem. So if you had no Jade Golem cards in your deck, which, why would you play her? I don't know. But even then, you're getting a 5/3, a 1/1, and a 2/2, which is a fair amount of stats. Since obviously you will have other Jade Golem cards in your deck, you may end up with a pretty big army of Jade Golems when she comes out. So, yeah, she could be generating like a 4/4, and then when she dies you get a 5/5, and that's very realistic. That is not hard to arrange at all. So, I don't know how much that Jade Golem stuff slows you down, but it does seem like a pretty snowball-y, gross, powerful strategy. Big Time Racketeer, he's kind of fun. He's a 1/1 for 6, but he comes with a 6/6. So you're getting 7/7 worth of stats for 6 mana, and you can maybe do some trickery with battle cries. Like you could play Bran and get a 1/1 and 2 6/6s. Or, you know, he could be getting stats from your other things that buff stuff in your hand, so he's not quite as tiny, and then also gives you a 6/6, you know. I don't know. He seems like fun, perfectly reasonable, good arena pick. Defias Cleaner is a 5/7 for 6. His battle cry is to silence a minion, but it's specifically got to be a minion with Death Rattle. That's interesting. Interesting. I mean, there are a lot of Death Rattles out there, and you do wish you could silence them. So, it's perfectly fine from that department. 5/7 for 6. Those are okay stats. Much better. I would rather have that than a 7/5. He's going to come out and get rid of one annoying Death Rattle. I don't know how much you would play him. I would definitely choose him in the arena, though. He's a good arena choice. But, I don't know. I guess he's sort of a counter to things. That's kind of expensive to be put in your deck as a counter to things. But he's a good-sized minion, so it doesn't hurt. Fight Promoter is a 4/4 for 6 battle cry. If you control a minion with 6 or more health, draw 2 cards. Okay, now we're talking. 4/4 for 6 that gives you 2 cards. The condition you have to meet, not necessarily that hard, because you should be able to get a minion with 6 hit points relatively cheaply. Now, you have to have a number of them in your deck. Your opponent may be damaging them to get them down. I mean, this is something that high-level players are going to have to worry about, maybe possibly just reducing the health of your enemy's 6+ health minions, so that, like, doing some damage to them, so that the other person doesn't just play a Fight Promoter and draw 2 cards. Because getting a 4/4 and 2 cards for 6 mana is a lot of value. And later in the game, if you have a bunch of cheap minions that have a lot of health, like the Public Defender, or like the 3 mana +1 spell power imp, that's a 0/7, then turn 8 or 9, you could play one of those cheap guys with a lot of health, and then play this, get that and the 4/4, and draw 2 cards. That is a lot. Here's another chopper. I remember this one. He seems terrible to me too. 6/6 for 6, which, okay, at 6/6 for 6 is okay stats. So you're not getting hosed so much if this doesn't get charged, certainly in the arena. It only gets charged if your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand. That's a little harder to arrange. If there was more stuff like the Blubber Baron, this would get way more interesting. So maybe in the next set they're going to make more guys, more cards that do something while they sit in your hand. But at the moment, I don't see this as getting charged that often, but 6/6 for 6 is not. I'd rather have a 6/6 for 6 with no abilities than a 4/4 for 4 with no abilities. Because a 4/4 is just like an awkward place where it's not likely to... It's too easy to kill. It's not doing enough damage to make it worthwhile. I don't know. But that ability... I don't like stuff that's contingent on how many cards your opponent has in hand, because you don't really control that. But this one seems more viable than the 4/4. This guy... Opponent having a taunt, that seems like not that hard a condition to meet. Madame Goya. She's a 4/3 for 6 legendary. Battlecry, choose a friendly minion, swap it with a minion in your deck. So that is like, you take one of your minions in play, you shove it back into your deck, and then it randomly pulls another minion from your deck out into play. If your deck is full of expensive minions, then you can improve your chances. So, I mean, she works with the same kind of guys in a way that that you would play with Barnes. So she does help those Barnes decks to not be based on a single card. It's interesting. And she does, I mean, you could put your Barnes back into your deck so that you could maybe play him again later. I don't know if that's worthwhile at all. But that's, she's interesting there anyway. If you had Battlecry stuff, then she would let you could put away a Battlecry minion so you could hopefully play it again later. If you had Death Rattle stuff, then you could get out Death Rattle stuff, but you wouldn't want to be putting the Death Rattle stuff back into your deck. And also, if you have a lot of Battlecry stuff, you don't want to be putting them back into your deck. Or you don't want to be pulling them out of your deck, because then they're not as good as what you could be getting. I don't know. Wind Up Burglebot is a 5/5 mech for 6. Whenever this attacks a minion and survives, you draw a card. I mean, that could be good, but it does seem like a lot of work. So 5/5 for 6 is not that survivable. And he has nothing... A lot of the other minions in this set that do something good when they attack have stealth. Wind Up Burglebot is not that stealthy, so he doesn't have any good way to ensure that he survives to attack once. If you knew he would survive to get in one attack, he would be pretty decent. But since he doesn't have that stealth or really a lot of hit points for his cost, I don't know. Rathian. He's a 4/5 taunt for 6. His Battlecry is just draw cards until you draw one that isn't a dragon. So basically, he's a 4/5 taunt for 6, you draw a card. If that card is a dragon, you draw another card. If that card is a dragon, you draw another card. So if your deck has a lot of dragons, he could draw you a lot of dragons. He is not himself tagged dragon, interestingly. But he seems like I don't know if he's a high priority to craft or anything, but he does seem like if you had a deck with a lot of dragons, he seems like a pretty worthwhile thing to put in it, because he will draw you at least one card. Sometimes he'll draw 2 or 3. Don Hancho. I think he's pretty cool. I don't know how popular he's going to be with, like, pro players and stuff. 5/6 for 7. Little on the small side. His Battlecry gives a random minion in your hand +5/+5. There have got to be a ton of ways that you can make that work out. If nothing else, you save a Bluegill Murloc in your hand. Turn 9, you play Don Hancho, so you get a 5/6. He gives you a Murloc +5/+5. For 2 mana, you play a 7/6 charge. If you can do that, you can potentially do lots of other good things with Don Hancho. So he seems fine, and he's a neutral legendary for he's a faction legendary. So you can play him in a hunter, paladin, or warrior deck. And then there's Mayor Noggenfogger, the most expensive legendary in the set, 9 cost. He's just a 5/4 for 9. And he makes all targets chosen randomly. Like, you remember Mogor, and he's like, whenever a minion attacks, there's a 50-50 chance that it will randomly attack the wrong thing on the enemy side? No. This is full Yogg Saron. Anything that has a spell will target anything that could be a valid target for that spell. No one has any choice in the matter. That's just really annoying. I can't imagine ever playing him. He's very expensive, and I don't like him. But those are cards in Streets of Gadgetstan. I think we're going to see some interesting decks going on. There will be some strong dragon decks. There are going to be some more Barnes, Madame Goya sort of decks. There's going to be some crazy Jade Golem stuff going on. There's going to be so many decks buffing up the minions in your hands. Crazy doppelgangster shenanigans. And things are going to get very interesting, including in the arena, next time.
please click the like button before it clicks you. And check out Tales from my D&D campaign on youtube.com/Demonac.